It's clearly very much still winter around here. This is early February and we're well below freezing, but the sun is starting to get stronger. Every day it's a little bit longer day and a little bit stronger sun. Kind of forget about that every year. And with the increasing sun energy, my thoughts start to turn towards our season extension spaces and getting them primed and ready to go so we can get a good early start on the season. Big old Stanley will come out and take a look with me at our Hightunnel space. This is our space out at our neighbors here, 14 by 50 foot space that we've talked about extensively. I'm going to go inside and take a look and talk about some of the things that I'm thinking about working on right now so we can be ready soon enough. So still a little bit messy. Juan and I worked the other day in here just a little bit to clean up some of the weediness and tidy up some of the beds. Oh, looks like Stanley will be joining us for this wander. That's lovely. Very, very early in the season. There's not much going on in here just yet. We've had, I think, -8 or so Fahrenheit this winter, which is cold enough to zero out a lot of the things that were growing in here. And I want to revisit this compost heating bin. We've talked about this in the past. I will link to it here if I can find original videos talking about this. This roughly, maybe it's 3.5 feet by 3.5 feet, a meter by a meter by a meter-ish. I think we can fill it all the way up to this mesh this season. So it's a decent amount of volume that can be packed with a lot of raw ingredients, organic matter, and generate some warmth. And that's one of the things I want to focus on today, is both figuring out a better system for hydrating this space, since we're not using a well out here, and getting this compost heating system up and running. And the plan is to use a lot of what's in this walkway to fuel that compost system. This is a deposit space that we use all season. This walkway in the middle doubles as a windrow space to throw all the weeds. So like as we were pulling weeds around tomato plants, we threw them in the walkway. As we found rotten tomatoes, we threw them in there. When we cleaned up vines in the fall, we threw them all in the walkway. I put grass clippings and mowing bits and things like that. And then we capped it with wood chips in the fall. And so it's a relatively deep windrow of raw ingredients that, if they were consolidated, would be able to kick off and generate some warmth. And there's also some renovation that needs to be done with this system. So there's a solar panel here that attaches directly to this fan. You can hear it running. So it's a 12-volt ventilation fan, and it pulls in air from underneath this low tunnel. Whenever the sun is hot enough and strong enough to generate heat under here, it's also strong enough to drive the direct flow of energy from that panel into this fan. It forces the air down through this tube, which is then buried down in the earth underneath this walkway. It goes all the way to the far end and then exits underneath our water tank. And I think at some point rodents or something got into the tube and filled it with soil, so it's not functioning properly. So I've got to dig this all out and get the tube out, empty it, and set it back in. More than what's going to happen today, but just kind of highlighting some of the things we're working on. The nice thing about putting some energy towards this at the end of January, early February, is we're still a few weeks out from thinking about starting seeds in here. We'll probably focus on doing our onion starts relatively soon. It'll be like this 3rd week of February, but that'll be once the compost heating system is fully up and running, the soil in here is really deeply hydrated, and our air pump system to put heat down through this walkway during the heat of the day so it can radiate out at night. Once all those ingredients are in place, we'll be able to really hit the ground running. I want to talk a little bit about my ideas for drawing water into here while the earth is still frozen. We've got this IBC tank in the corner, which I think I've talked about before. This is plumbed to just a standard garden hose. Very, very low pressure, low flow rate. You can see we've been using it to hydrate some of the walkway and the soil in here. This normally is filled from a bunch of tanks way up the hill that are collecting off of our neighbor's barn, but all those lines are frozen right now, so this stays pretty well thawed by having the poly over it and getting the warm air in there. But I'd like to think through a way to refill this. And this end of the Hightunnel is the west end. We've got some air prune boxes on the outside here. It's also positioned to be very close to our pond. And this morning I came out with a slotted shovel and busted through the ice. It's It's there. It's not super thick. It's probably like 3 or 4 inches thick. I can clear out that hole. The water is about 2 or 3 feet deep right there, ice cold. But we can put a 12-volt bilge pump down in there and either a solar panel or a battery and start drawing water from the pond to refill the tank. I might do that next. We've accrued some nice gear over time. Juan and I came up with this design a little ways back. This is a 12-volt bilge pump, 750 gallon per hour bilge pump, pretty lightweight, under $20. And this was his design to put this mesh, so it's 1/2-inch hardware cloth and then old fencing to position that down, and then door screen over that, so it's like a nice rigid cage to filter the water coming through. And then that's wired up to old extension cord with Anderson power pole in case you're interested in that. We can talk about this in another video. And then our friend James Mead over at standardbattery.com, they make these custom batteries that are 12 volt and completely waterproof, which is really nice. So I can use this for outside stuff. The hose is frozen, so I got to give this a little bit of time to all thaw out before we can even set it up. I think I'm going to start by putting some energy towards raking up and accumulating some piles of the raw ingredients for a compost from the middle walkway. It's cool to see. It's a pretty functional design to have a central walkway in a covered space be where you dump all your raw ingredients throughout the season of compost and such. Like even in the winter here, the red wiggler activity is decently strong. I think there's enough warmth down in there, just a little bit of decomposition heat happening, that this is basically a gentle composting windrow and really affirming to red wigglers. And I think I'm even seeing some good fungal life in these wood chips. So it's worked out pretty nicely as like a life space, and it's certainly a short commute for all the material, the excess organic matter that's generated in the space during the season. Digging down here, trying to find how deep down the tube was, and I realized it's actually a lot deeper than I thought. And interesting to see, so all those layers of organic matter throughout the season, and it shouldn't be surprising, but somehow it is in a high tunnel space. It's turning into soil down below. I always figured this space was too dry, but I think the material is just so deep, the organic matter is so rich that any drippings, excess waterings from the garden beds ended up in this central walkway. And so I actually have material that we can be harvesting off to send to the compost heating system on the east end there, but then material down below that we'd be better off harvesting and actually putting directly back into the beds. This is ready to go into beds to grow crops, not to try to generate heat and decomposition. So lots of raw ingredients in here. Pretty sweet to see that central windrow vibe really working out. This black hose in front of me runs back to that tank on the far west end, and I just opened that valve. It's a trickle, but we really you need moisture in order for composting systems to function, especially to generate heat. And so this is the low flow. This is basically as fast as it's going to go flowing out of that tank. And so I'll just move this around as we go putting material on here. And so that'll add the hydration. And then for straight nitrogen, we can use these containers of pure nitrogen and mineral collected from a very, very local, sustainable source, abundant, sustainable source. If you know what I'm talking about, you know what I'm talking about. And so I'm going to add this in to add the nitrogen component to really get some heat generating within what is predominantly a wood chip situation. So some moisture, nice spike of nitrogen, and then a huge amount of carbon and fungal life. This should be a very healthy compost pile. Once we get it filled up high enough, we'll put some straight charcoal on top to act as a filter. Pretty nice set of raw ingredients to start a compost pile made just from the top scrapings of this walkway. It doesn't even look like it took much at all off. It's probably about 6 to 8 inches of material we can take off before we're getting down into soil. So probably enough to fill that entire compost heating system. And we'll leave it bare so we can redo the pipe. I won't be able to get to that today realistically, but we'll get the pipe relayed back in, and then we'll take frozen wood chips from outside and refill this for the rest of the winter so we don't have the pipe being exposed, and then the hot air from the space going through frozen wood chips should be able to thaw them out and get them started towards decomposition too. Speaking of thawed, I think this hose is thawed out enough that I can put it out and get that set up, so that's next. It's not thawed out enough yet, otherwise water would be coming out of here. So somewhere in this dense green hose is enough ice to restrict the flow from that pump. I can see it squirting out here. It would rather come out here than down the other end. That's the tricky part of trying to get water moving when you're in a northern climate in the beginning of February. It's asking a lot. We'll have to give it a little bit more time to cool off, to warm up. Back at this walkway, I got the chips more or less pulled off the top here and into the compost heating, and this is what I'm digging into, the bottom of a year's worth of deposition in that walkway. Pretty phenomenal. I'm going to need to break that up and smooth it out, and then we'll really need to think about hydration sooner than later, because right now this is nice and moist, it's been cool, and now it's going to be in a very sunny and not hydrated space under poly. I don't want to bake out all that goodness, so I'll do some, but I'll need to make sure we can actually hydrate and that the pump's going to work before I go too hard on this. But this material I can get a lot of. It's enough in there to close the front. Now I can spread that out with the hay fork. A lot of this will settle and keep building up from there. I don't think today I'm going to be able to get up into the 2x4 welded wire part of it. I think we would need some hay in order to hold material in, but I like the idea of filling it all the way up to the very top of that and then letting it settle a little later. Try this pump once more before I run out of light and steam for myself. Seemed more promising. I blew through it and air moved through, so hopefully water can too. I've got it plugged in and I can hear it trying to work its way through. I'm going to let it run for a moment or two and see if it'll actually purge the ice. Yeah, fun. Probably not amazing for the pump to have to do this, but I think it's pushing the water past the blocks of ice that are in there and probably melting it as it goes. At some point, some little nuggets of ice will just come shooting out of the end of this. So I could be a little bit more patient and probably just leave the hose in the Hightunnel for another sunny day and come out in the evening and do it. But I'm not patient. I wanted to see water flow. It's been so long. It's going. I don't think I'll blow the pump out. There we go. Getting closer. Now I can put this, once it's at full flow, into the IBC tank here and fill the tank from the top. And why not just use this water directly from the pond into the soil here? I could do that, but this is just absolutely frigidly cold, whereas the tank it has a buffering since it's getting heated by the light and the air in here. So if I fill the tank and then the tank slowly goes to the gardens, I get a much more thermal buffered flow of water, and that's fine enough for me. I don't need a fast rate of flow. There we go, full rate of flow. So now I can get this hose up and into the top of this tank so it can start stirring into the water that's in there. Maybe the single most valuable thing about coming out this early in the season is, after a very long winter, being able to be in a space in a t-shirt getting sun on my skin. Even though it's late day here, it's cooling off quite a bit. This is pretty therapeutic to actually be in the sun. Getting pretty close to being ready to be done. I don't want to push it because it's pretty easy after a long winter of not doing this kind of work to overdo it, because it's exciting and either get too much sun, which is kind of wacky to say at the beginning of February, but definitely too much pushing of my back. So I'm not going to go much harder, but I did get a few things done. Compost heating bin is well on its way. It's got 4 gallons of straight pure liquid nitrogen, liquid gold, and is nearly filled to the metal top with scrapings from the walkway. I think this will start kicking off with some heat very soon. I'll do an update with an actual temperature probe and see what sort of amount of heat it's radiating. And this will be a space where we bury crates of root cuttings and different things that require bottom heat in order to get started. And then as we start flats of seeds, we can put this on top as well with poly over it if we need that for basically like a mimicking of Florida kind of conditions this time of year. So that's fun. We'll do more on that soon. The pathways are getting scraped. You can see where I've revealed the air exchange system from underneath the low tunnel a little ways down. I can verify that air is coming out down the line, but somewhere there's an impediment. I'll find that later. A lot more to scrape on the far end. A lot of nice soil coming out of the bottom of the walkway from that composting system. I'm going to leave it chunky for now. Some freeze thaw cycles will break it up a little, and then once I actually have some good water, I'll water it as I break it up just to settle and leach the nutrients into the soil below. This area on the south will get a sheet of poly over it from that bar down, and that'll be where we do some seed starting as well as under this space, but there's no rush. Another 14, 20 days before I'm thinking about that. And it's kind of a mess over here, but it is functional and doing the thing. There is this old scrapped garden hose now running much better. Not full bore, but not too bad. That is slowly filling the IBC tank. I'm gonna unplug all this and bring it into the Hightunnel for this evening and bring the battery back. But at some point in the next few days, I'll refill this so our both our water battery, but also the thermal battery that this represents is topped off, so it can absorb the heat and radiate it back out. And then again, once we get that ground air heat transfer thing, this is the end of the tube on this far end of the tunnel. No air is coming out of here. Once that's actually coming out again, a lot of warm heat, a lot of warm air will be able to push up into the metal underneath this and be actively warming this before we use it. That's enough for today. Time to put some stuff away and aim back. Thanks for watching this far. Hope you're doing well in the winter and getting ready for spring wherever you might be. Maybe you're in a place where it's already actively the growing season. I'm envious at this point in the year, although by August or September I tend to like that we actually have a winter to rest. Anyway, let me know if you have any questions or comments, concerns, ideas. One last thing, in the description, if you're interested, I have opened up remote consultations again for the month of February. I'm doing, for most weekdays, 7 p.m. Eastern time, I have slots open where folks can register and get an hour of my undivided attention via a video call or phone call, if that's your preference, to try to help you with setting this kind of stuff up, or chicken composting, or designing your system. So if that's of interest, check it out in the description. Once we get into spring, I won't be able to do it anymore, but right now I can in the evenings. Thank you so much for watching. Take care.